Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. A ton of buzz, a ton of noise regarding the Nebraska quarterback position heading into 2024. Obviously, a couple days ago, it sounded like Kyle McCord trending to Lincoln, Dylan Raiola trending to Lincoln. And then all of a sudden last night, Kyle McCord shuts down his recruitment to Nebraska, decides to go and look at a few other different places to be the starting quarterback in 2024. I want to give you guys some of my thoughts, some of my opinions on what happened with Kyle McCord, Dylan Raiola, and that quarterback situation, then talk about what this quarterback room is going to look like for Nebraska in 2024. Really excited to get into this one. There's been a ton of buzz, a ton of noise, a ton of varying opinions from all sorts of fan bases on this one. You got Georgia, Ohio State, Nebraska fans all chatting about it. Really interesting conversations. Excited to get into it. Before we do, just want to say thank you to you guys and a special shout out to the Nebraska fans. This is obviously a program I love talking about. You guys have shown a ton of support to the boys. Cannot thank you guys enough. One, if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. More importantly, there are a lot of different opinions that you can have on this situation. Would love to hear it in the comment section. We'll chop it up there. And without further ado, let's get into it. And let's start with Kyle McCord. A guy that we were really excited about to wind up at Nebraska, top 50 national prospect coming out of high school, one of the more talented quarterbacks in his high school recruiting class, and a damn solid college football player. Right? You look back at his starting time at Ohio State, went 11-1, who only lost one game, 6 points to the number one team in the country, Michigan, on the road, threw for over 3,000 yards, 24 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. Kyle McCord, I think, wanted to come to Nebraska because that was a position group that he could come in and be the guy right away. And we said Kyle McCord at Nebraska would have a lot of success. I mean, Nebraska needed a quarterback that's going to make the throws that you needed to make, not turn the ball over, not make those mistakes. Kyle McCord would have been that guy. Now, his, not going to say decommitment because he was never committed, but him shutting the door on this Nebraska program, I don't think it's a coincidence that it coincided with a lot of the noise and a lot of the chatter coming with Dylan Raiola potentially winding up in Lincoln and signing with Nebraska and being there in that quarterback room in 2024. And you look back to why Kyle McCord left that Ohio State room. I'll say this: you don't leave that Ohio State quarterback room unless the prospects of you starting are not looking good, right? Because you look at the history of Ohio State quarterbacks and where they're drafted: Justin Fields, C.J. Stroud, Dwayne Haskins. That is arguably the most appealing quarterback one position in all of college football. Kyle McCord's not leaving that unless he knew that he had a good idea that he wouldn't have been the starter. And so why was Lincoln such an appealing place for Kyle McCord is, let's be honest, Kyle McCord would have came in and been the starter in 2024 when you look at that current quarterback room for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. And we were really excited about it. You take a look at 24 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. He completes a lot of balls. He doesn't turn the ball over. You put Kyle McCord on that Nebraska team in 2023, there's a large possibility that they are competing for a Big Ten title and winning the Big Ten West. I mean, that's what Kyle McCord, I think, would have meant to this Nebraska team in 2023. And he shuts down the recruitment in Nebraska once that noise of Dylan Raiola starts popping up. And then that kind of gets us to Dylan Raiola coming to Nebraska, which obviously sounds really good. And it makes you even feel a little bit better about Kyle McCord transferring. It sounds like Dylan Raiola is definitely trending to Nebraska. Now, there's still some work to be done, and we're going to celebrate it once he signs on the dotted line. That being said, when you look at how you're building a roster, Matt Rhule's been very vocal about getting guys out of the high school ranks and developing them. He's going to use the transfer portal. If there's difference makers to be had, he's going to use it. You've heard the interviews, but how he wants to build this program is out of the high school ranks. And especially when you're talking about a quarterback like Dylan Raiola, it is a guy that Nebraska's not going to be in the position to land a generational kind of quarterback every single high school recruiting cycle. I mean, this is kind of a one-in-a-decade opportunity for Nebraska to grab a quarterback that is so highly rated, that is so highly talented, you really couldn't pass it up. So you're asking me, Kyle McCord, Dylan Raiola, if you can only have one, I mean, yeah, might it hurt the quarterback room in 2024, that particular season? Yeah, it absolutely might. Is a Kyle McCord going to maybe play better than a true freshman Dylan Raiola? I would think so. I don't think it's a guarantee, but I would probably guess yes. But when you have the opportunity to get Dylan Raiola in Lincoln for 3 to 4 years versus Kyle McCord just one, to me, it's a no-brainer. And so taking Dylan Raiola at the expense of Kyle McCord, I think a lot of Nebraska fans are doing the exact same thing. And for people like buzzing around about why Dylan Raiola is leaving Georgia, whether it was because Carson Beckett is coming back, or they have that other quarterback in Ryan Puglisi that they like, or Georgia soured on Dylan Raiola. That's 100%, I don't think, the case. Now, why is Dylan Raiola coming to Nebraska? One, I'm not going to be ignorant and say that NIL is not playing a factor. There's no doubt that is playing a factor in getting him to Lincoln. I think a lot of people are forgetting the storyline, not the Nebraska fans as much, but the national media, who don't necessarily understand the culture of Nebraska and Dylan Raiola's ties to that program. There is a large possibility that that's just home to him. That's family to him. And you've seen his dad and go on and on about what Nebraska's program means to Dylan Raiola, and kind of a personal note. I mean, you see the Nebraska quarter zip I'm wearing. I'm born and raised a Michigan fan. My girlfriend's and her family, massive Nebraska fans. I've been to many Nebraska games. It's hard not to fall in love with that program. And when you're born into that Nebraska family, there's just a large possibility that Dylan Raiola, and you've seen the videos of him at the basketball games throwing up the bones, like there's a large possibility that that's just where he wants to be. He wants to be in Lincoln and not in Athens, Georgia. Now, again, is the NIL and playing opportunity all playing a factor? Quite possibly. But there's also a large conversation had that Dylan Raiola just wants to be in Lincoln because that's home, that's family to him. And a lot of Nebraska fans are extremely excited at the idea of having a generationally talented quarterback in this Nebraska quarterback room, whether he's playing in 2024, whether he's not. The future is going to be bright in that quarterback room. And that the next conversation you could have was with Daniel Kaelin, a guy that, I mean, whether he winds up in the Nebraska class in 2024 or not, he's obviously taking a visit to Michigan State. He is going to be a guy that almost every Nebraska fan is going to root for, whether he's in a Husker jersey, whether he's in a different jersey, Michigan State jersey, because he's a guy that when it looked bad for Nebraska and Dylan Raiola ends up going to Georgia and you're confused about the quarterback room, Daniel Kaelin commits to Nebraska, does a phenomenal job getting some other Nebraska guys to come and commit to the class. He is really responsible for building the class that they have in 2024. And can you blame him for leaving and going and looking at different options for him to be a quarterback? Absolutely not. Going into the same class with Dylan Raiola, one of the more talented quarterbacks we've seen come from the high school ranks, it makes sense. And so you want, in a perfect world, Daniel Kaelin's coming in, he's competing, and he wants to wear a Nebraska jersey and play on Saturdays in Lincoln. That's what we want. But if he has to go to Michigan State, that totally makes sense. And I don't think anyone is going to begrudge him. And I think a lot of Nebraska fans are, in fact, going to root for Daniel Kaelin wherever he ends up deciding to play football during his career. At the end of the day, a lot of Nebraska fans that I've seen on the timeline, and I don't know if it's kind of indicative of how a lot of Nebraska fans feel, are acting like Nebraska fumbled the bag here and they lost out on Kyle McCord. The way I see it, if you land Dylan Raiola in this 2024 class, that is anything but a fumble. You were getting one of the more talented quarterbacks that we've seen from the high school level coming to Lincoln, a clear position of need for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Is he going to be the guy in 2024? I think he certainly has the talent to. I think it's really rare to see quarterbacks come in and start day one as a freshman, but I think he certainly has the capability to. At the very least, he's elevating this quarterback room and the talent that's within this quarterback room. And you might see Nebraska go and try to bring in another quarterback, a more veteran guy that's going to compete with Dylan Raiola, potentially be a bridge quarterback for that 1 year. But at the end of the day, if it was between Kyle McCord and Dylan Raiola, it was a no-brainer decision for Matt Rule. It was a no-brainer decision for that coaching staff to go with Dylan Raiola for the next 3 to 4 years as opposed to Kyle McCord for one. Now, for Nebraska fans, I do have another update. Just wanted to buzz this by while we're talking Nebraska football. A lot of buzz around the JUCO transfer wide receiver Deandre Deus. And if you're a long-term listener for like that's been listening the last couple of weeks, Deandre Deus has been mentioned. Right, he's not getting a ton of offers from the JUCO ranks. Nebraska is one of them. He changed his Instagram title, or a header, you should say, to a pass or ball catcher at Husker football. This is a guy that is extremely intriguing. Former 5-star out of the high school recruiting rankings. A guy that runs a 4.43 40, a 41-inch vert, dripping with talent at the wide receiver position. As much as we've had the conversation about the quarterback position at Nebraska in 2023, the wide receiver position was just as much of a problem. And that not as much of a problem in terms of just the injuries, and having to start multiple true freshman wide receivers at that position is never a great thing to do. And you look at the position of need outside of the quarterback position for the Nebraska Cornhuskers, I mean, wide receiver is probably the next one on the list. And Deandre Deus, a guy that, so a little background for Deandre Deus, was a 5-star coming out of high school in the state of Texas, committed to Texas A&M, had some off-the-field issues. He ends up transferring out, goes to JUCO rank, has a very good year at JUCO, and is looking to get back up to that Power 5 level. Very similar vibes to Eric Gilbert a little bit in terms of like really high upside. He has some off-the-field concerns. If I'm Nebraska, I think you're taking a swing on this guy. It's a position of need where you want to inject some talent into this roster. And Deandre Deus, you can't argue with what he can be as a wide receiver at the Power 5 level. There's a reason this guy was a 5-star. He's up to 200 pounds from his high school days. He still absolutely burns. He has extremely explosiveness. You see it with the 41-inch vertical. I think this would be a massive addition. We're looking at that Nebraska wide receiver, Julian Fleming. I mean, I know Kyle McCord's left, but maybe we can still grab Julian Fleming. But you look at that wide receiver room and say, we need some talent in that position. We need talent and we need experience. And Deandre Deus would certainly inject that in to this Nebraska program. I would keep an eye on him. I don't really know. I haven't heard too much buzz about it, but it sounds like things might be going in the right direction. High upside pass catcher at a position of need would be a phenomenal addition for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. And at the end of the day, Nebraska doesn't need to go out to the portal and get 20, 25 guys into this program. One, I think the numbers are crunched, and I think they really like what they're bringing in the 2024 class. But two, this team was 5-7 with the worst turnover margin across the whole country. And so you look at this team is good. If they can clean up a few things that are massively important to winning football games, turnovers, red zone scoring, and this is a Nebraska team that can win a lot of football games. The problem is not the lack of talent and players on this roster. The problem is fixing some of those mistakes. I think a quarterback would certainly help, but you look at another position that you might want to add at the wide receiver position with a talent like Deandre Deus, that would make a ton of sense for Nebraska as well. We'll continue to monitor that. Wanted to hop on, talk about the Kyle McCord, Dylan Raiola situation. In my mind, it's not a fumble. If you end up getting Dylan Raiola, like that is the ultimate win for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.